Welcome to Private Stories, where people discover who they really are. My name is Nathan Brooks, and until a few nights ago, I believed my life was the kind people quietly hope for when they settle down. 39 years of marriage had a way of convincing me that whatever storms existed in the world, they would never reach the foundation Emily and I had built together. We met when we were barely more than kids in Columbus, Ohio, both working part-time jobs and pretending we already knew who we were going to become. She had this warm, open smile and hair the color of honey under sunlight, and when she laughed, she tilted her head back like she did not care who was watching. I remember thinking even then that if I could just keep hearing that laugh for the rest of my life, I would be fine. Somehow I did. Or at least I thought I did. We built everything slowly the way ordinary people do. A modest house on a quiet street in a suburb outside Denver years later after job transfers and long nights of saving money. 2 children who grew up faster than either of us was ready for. A maple tree in the yard planted the day our daughter came home from the hospital, now tall enough to shade half the driveway. Vacation photos stacked in boxes we kept meaning to organize. Arguments about bills, reconciliations over late-night takeout, small rituals that become invisible because they repeat for decades. Emily was always the center of it all. If I was the structure, she was the warmth inside it. Calm when I was tense, patient when I was stubborn, endlessly attentive to details I would never even notice. For most of my life, I never questioned whether she was happy. I assumed she was because I was. Looking back, that assumption feels almost naive, like believing a house is safe simply because it has never caught fire. The evening everything changed did not announce itself as important. It was a Tuesday, nothing special about it. I had come home later than usual after a long day at the engineering firm where I had worked for most of my adult life. Emily had made grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and one of those light lemon sauces she knew I liked. Normally dinner meant easy conversation, small updates about neighbors or the kids or whatever show she had been watching lately. That night the silence stretched too long. She pushed food around her plate without really eating. Her eyes drifted toward the window again and again, as if she expected something to appear outside. I asked if she felt sick. She said she was just tired. I asked if something had happened with our son, who had recently moved to Seattle. She shook her head. Her voice sounded distant, like she was speaking from another room. I told myself she was probably stressed or coming down with something. After nearly 4 decades together, you learn not to interrogate every change in mood. People are allowed to have quiet days. Still, a faint uneasiness settled in my chest, the kind you cannot justify but cannot shake either. When we finished eating, she surprised me by stopping me before I could carry the plates to the sink. "Can we sit in the living room for a minute?" she asked. Her tone was careful, too careful. Emily was a woman of routines: dishes first, then tea, then television on low volume while she folded laundry. Breaking that pattern felt like stepping onto unstable ground. We sat facing each other, the coffee table between us suddenly looking like a barrier rather than furniture. She clasped her hands together, twisting her wedding ring slowly around her finger. I noticed how pale her knuckles had become. "Nathan," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something important, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." A chill moved through me, sharp and immediate. People only speak like that when they are about to detonate a truth they cannot take back. "You are starting to worry me," I said, trying to keep my voice light, but hearing the tension in it anyway. She inhaled deeply, eyes dropping to her lap as if the words were written there. "Do you remember Mark Sullivan?" For a moment the name meant nothing. Then memory surfaced, dusty and distant. Tall guy, dark hair, used to run every morning, wore those bright blue windbreakers that were popular back in the 90s. He lived next door during the early years after we moved into that house, when money was tight and the kids were still small. Friendly enough, always quick to offer help with yard work or tools. I had not thought about him in at least 20 years. "Yeah, I remember him," I said slowly. "Why?" Her shoulders trembled once, almost imperceptibly. "Because there is something about that time I never told you." My stomach tightened in a way that felt instinctive rather than logical. We had always considered ourselves honest with each other, not perfect but transparent. Secrets were something other couples had, not us. What kind of secret survives nearly 4 decades? Emily lifted her eyes to mine, and I saw fear, their raw, unguarded fear. When you were working those double shifts at the plant, she said, Mark, and I got closer than we should have. I frowned, not yet understanding. Closer how? She swallowed hard, the movement visible in her throat. We had an affair. The sentence did not feel real. It hovered in the air between us, detached from meaning like a foreign language I almost understood but not quite. I heard the ticking clock on the wall louder than anything else. I noticed the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Everything except the words that were supposed to matter most. I think I misheard you, I said finally, because my brain refused to process them. Tears filled her eyes, instantly spilling down her cheeks. I am so sorry, Nathan, it happened a long time ago, but I cannot carry it anymore. Long time ago. As if that softened anything. How long, I asked, my voice sounding flat even to my own ears. Several months, she whispered. Not a single lapse, not a moment of weakness. Months of deliberate deception. During all that time you came home to me, I said slowly. You slept beside me, you helped our kids with homework, you looked me in the eyes every day. She covered her mouth as a sob escaped. I hated myself for it every single day. Something inside me went cold and hollow. I stood because sitting suddenly felt impossible, like trying to remain calm in a burning room. Why tell me now? The question came out harsher than I intended, but I needed an anchor, something that made sense. Because I cannot breathe with this anymore, she said. I wake up at night feeling like a fraud. You deserve to know the truth. Truth delivered decades too late does not feel like honesty, it feels like an explosion delayed until maximum damage is guaranteed. I turned toward the window, staring at the dark outline of the yard. The maple tree branches moved gently in the wind, the same tree we planted together when our daughter was born. All those years it had been growing while this secret existed in the background like rot inside a wall. Did you love him? The words escaped before I could stop them. She shook her head immediately, too quickly. No, it was not love. I was lonely. You were always exhausted, always working. I felt invisible, and he noticed me. Invisible. The word echoed unpleasantly. So being noticed justified destroying everything we were building. It was a mistake, she said weakly. You do not accidentally maintain a secret relationship for months, I replied. You make choices again and again. She had no answer, only tears sliding down her face unchecked. For the first time in my life, her crying did not trigger the instinct to comfort. It felt distant, almost irrelevant compared to the pressure building inside my chest. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier. I realized with a sudden clarity that the life I believed in had just shifted onto unstable ground. And I had no idea how deep the cracks went. I did not remember deciding to stand or to move yet. Somehow I found myself in the hallway staring at the front door, as if it had appeared there for the first time. Emily was saying something behind me, her voice thin, stretched, fragile, but the words blended into noise I could not separate or understand. My hand closed around the doorknob, cold metal grounding me in a way nothing else could. Nathan, please do not leave like this. Like this. As if there were a correct way to leave after hearing that your entire past might be built on a lie. I need air, I said, though the words felt mechanical, detached from thought. Outside, the night had that sharp, dry chill typical of late autumn in Colorado, the kind that clears your lungs whether you want it or not. I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me more gently than I felt. The street was quiet, most houses dark, except for a few warm rectangles of light glowing through curtains. Normal lives continuing uninterrupted. For a long moment, I simply stood there trying to feel something specific: anger, grief, even rage, anything solid. Instead, there was only a strange numb buzzing inside my head like static. My feet started moving on their own down the sidewalk, past the mailbox I had repaired countless times, past the neighbor's fence, past the maple tree, whose leaves had already begun to fall in dry, brittle clusters. Each familiar landmark now looked slightly distorted, as if I were seeing it through warped glass. Memory after memory surfaced uninvited. Emily laughing while raking those same leaves years ago, her hair falling across her face. Our son running through piles of orange and red, scattering them everywhere. Me pretending to be annoyed while secretly loving the chaos. Had that been during the months she was with him? The question stabbed unexpectedly. There was no way to know. And suddenly every memory from that period felt contaminated like food that might or might not be spoiled. I reached the corner and turned toward Willow Park, a place we used to bring the kids when they were small. The playground stood empty, the metal swing chains creaking softly in the wind, producing a hollow rhythmic sound. I sat on a cold wooden bench staring at the dim outline of the basketball court. My hands trembled slightly, though I did not feel cold. 39 years. Most of a lifetime. And hidden inside it a secret large enough to shatter everything. Why now? That question circled endlessly. If she truly regretted it, why bury it for decades? If she did not regret it, why confess at all? Either possibility felt unbearable. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Emily. I watched the screen glow in the darkness until it stopped. Then started again almost immediately. Persistence had always been part of her nature. Finally, I answered, not out of forgiveness, but because the vibration itself felt unbearable. Nathan, please come home. Her voice was barely audible, like she was afraid speaking louder would break something fragile. Home. The word sounded foreign. We need to talk, she added. Talking implies solutions, I said quietly. I do not think there is a solution for this. Silence on the line, followed by a shaky inhale. I am begging you. The desperation in her voice stirred something painful, but not enough to override the heaviness crushing my chest. I will come back, I said eventually, but not because anything is okay. I ended the call before she could respond because I did not trust myself to hear more. On the walk back, the air seemed colder, the shadows deeper. I noticed details I normally ignored: the flicker of a street lamp, the distant bark of a dog, the faint smell of wood smoke from somewhere far away. All those small, ordinary elements of life continuing while mine felt suspended. When I opened the front door, the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the dinner we had barely touched. Emily was sitting exactly where I had left her, curled into the corner of the couch, as if trying to make herself smaller. Her eyes lifted immediately, hope flashing across her face so quickly it almost hurt to see. I am glad you came back, she whispered. I did not answer right away. Instead, I removed my jacket, folded it carefully, and placed it on the chair, a mundane action that felt absurdly important. I am here, I said finally, that is all I can promise. She nodded, wiping her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater. I want to explain. Explain what? I asked, my voice sharper than intended. Explain how you decided to betray me, or explain how you managed to pretend nothing was happening while we built a life together. She flinched as if the words had physical weight. I was lonely, she said. You were always working. You came home exhausted. We barely talked. I felt like I had disappeared inside our own life. So the solution was the man next door. It was not a solution, she insisted. It just happened. Nothing happens for months without permission, I replied. She pressed her palms against her eyes, breathing unevenly. Then she said something so quietly I almost missed it. I ended it when I found out he was seeing someone else too. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You mean you did not stop because of me? She shook her head, tears falling freely. I realized how stupid I had been. I thought I mattered to him. The irony was brutal, almost surreal. You betrayed your husband for a man who treated you as disposable. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. I gave you everything, I said, my voice cracking despite efforts to control it. My loyalty, my time, my future, and you risked it for someone who could walk away without looking back. I am so sorry, Nathan. I will do anything to fix this. Fix? The word sounded absurd in the context of something this large. You cannot repair trust like a broken appliance, Emily. She reached toward me, instinctively stopping midway when I did not move. Please do not give up on us. I do not even know what us means anymore. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I turned toward the staircase because standing there felt unbearable. Where are you going? She asked, panic creeping into her voice. To bed, I said, though sleep felt impossible. Tomorrow I will figure out what I am supposed to do next. As I climbed the stairs, her quiet crying followed me upward, echoing through the house we had shared for nearly 4 decades. For the first time in all those years, I did not turn back to comfort her. Something fundamental had shifted, and I did not know if it could ever shift back. Morning came too quickly and not at all quickly at the same time. I had not truly slept, only drifted in and out of shallow, restless fragments filled with disjointed images that dissolved the moment I opened my eyes. For a few seconds after waking, I experienced a strange, empty calm, the kind that exists before memory returns. Then everything flooded back at once, heavy and suffocating. The ceiling above me looked exactly the same, faint hairline crack in the corner, soft early light filtering through the curtains, nothing outwardly changed. Yet the room felt unfamiliar, as if I had woken up in a carefully constructed replica of my own life. The other side of the bed was empty, sheets pulled tight, pillow undisturbed. Emily had either not slept there or had left long before dawn. I sat up slowly, my body stiff, as if I had aged years overnight. Downstairs the house was silent, too silent, lacking the small domestic sounds that normally filled mornings. No kettle beginning to heat, no cupboard doors opening, no soft music playing from the kitchen radio she always kept tuned to an oldie station. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw her sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a mug that had long since stopped steaming. Her hair was loosely gathered at the back of her neck, strands falling free around her face, making her look smaller, somehow more fragile. Dark shadows circled her eyes, skin pale, as if all color had drained away during the night. "Morning," she said quietly, her voice hoarse, like she had been crying for hours. I did not answer. I poured coffee, moving carefully, precisely, as if following instructions written somewhere else. The familiar routine felt mechanical, devoid of comfort. Instead of sitting in my usual chair beside her, I chose the far end of the table, creating as much distance as possible within the same room. "Nathan, please, we need to talk." "We have been talking," I said flatly. She inhaled shakily, as though gathering courage for something difficult. "I know I cannot undo what I did, but I need to try to make things right. I love you." The words landed without impact, hollow sounds detached from meaning. Love was supposed to be protective, not destructive. "You do not get to use that word right now," I said quietly. She winced but did not argue. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, placing it on the table between us. Her hand lingered on it for a moment before sliding it toward me. "What is that?" I asked without touching it. "Something he wrote before he moved away," she said. "I kept it all these years. I do not know why, maybe because it reminded me how stupid I had been." Curiosity warred with revulsion. Part of me did not want to know anything more about that hidden chapter of her life. Another part needed every detail, as if information could somehow restore control. I picked up the paper. The edges were worn, creased from being folded and unfolded many times. Inside, the handwriting was neat, deliberate, impersonal. "Dear Emily, I wanted to thank you for the time we spent together. I know it was not right, and I regret the complications it caused, but I have met someone else and I need to move forward with my life. You are a wonderful person and I hope you find happiness too. Take care of yourself. Mark." That was it. No apology to me, no acknowledgement of the damage, no sense of responsibility. Just polite detachment, as if ending a casual acquaintance. I stared at the letter longer than necessary, my hands trembling slightly. "This is the man you risked everything for," I said finally. She lowered her gaze, unable to meet my eyes. I was not thinking clearly. I felt noticed after so long of feeling invisible. Invisible again. The word irritated me more now than before. "Did you ever consider how I felt during that time?" I asked. "Did you think about me coming home exhausted, believing I was doing the right thing for our family?" Tears slid down her cheeks silently. "Every day," she whispered. "That is why I ended it." "You ended it because he replaced you," I replied before she could reshape the narrative. Her shoulders collapsed inward as if the air had been knocked out of her. I pushed the letter back across the table, unable to bear touching it any longer. It felt contaminated, like holding evidence from a crime scene. "I need to get out," I said, standing abruptly. "Where are you going?" "I do not know, somewhere that does not feel like this." Outside the sky was pale, washed with thin morning light, the air crisp enough to sting my lungs. I drove without direction, passing neighborhoods, gas stations, empty storefronts, the city slowly waking around me. Eventually the road curved toward Lake Evergreen, a place we used to visit on summer weekends when the kids were young. The water lay flat and gray under the overcast sky, perfectly still like a sheet of glass. I parked near the shoreline and sat there gripping the steering wheel long after the engine stopped. Silence pressed in on all sides. Memories rose unbidden. Emily sitting on the hood of the car years ago, hair whipping in the wind, laughing as she tried to feed crackers to seagulls. Our daughter building crooked sand castles near the waterline. Our son skipping stones, determined to beat my record. Had those days been genuine or merely scenes in a life where I was the only one unaware of the full script? Trust once broken does not stay confined to a single moment, it spreads backward, poisoning everything that came before. A memory surfaced sharply one evening from that same period when she must have been seeing him. I had come home late to find candles lit, dinner ready, music playing softly. I had felt loved, appreciated, lucky. Now the image looked different, like stage lighting designed to distract from something happening offstage. Was she compensating for guilt? Or had she simply learned to perform affection convincingly? The questions had no answers, only more questions branching endlessly. Forgiveness crossed my mind briefly, not as something she deserved, but as something I might need if I wanted peace. Yet the idea felt like surrender, like accepting that what happened was survivable without consequences. After a long time I realized I had been staring at the same point on the water without really seeing it. My reflection, faintly visible in the windshield, looked older, harsher than I remembered. Eventually I started the car again. Avoiding her would not change reality. At some point decisions would have to be made. When I returned home, the house felt heavy, as if the air itself had thickened. Emily was back in the living room, knees drawn to her chest, exactly where she had been the night before, as though time had stalled for her completely. She looked up quickly, eyes searching my face. Relief flickered there, mixed with fear. "I was afraid you would not come back," she said softly. "I came back," I replied, "but I do not know if I am staying." Her expression crumpled instantly. "Please, Nathan, I know I have hurt you, but I will do anything to fix this." "How do you plan to repair decades of deception?" I asked quietly. "I will prove that I still love you, that I always have." Always is a dangerous word. You cannot claim to love someone while betraying them at the same time. She had no response, only silent tears slipping down her cheeks. I felt something inside me tighten, not quite anger, not quite grief, something heavier than both. "I need time," I said finally. "I cannot make decisions like this while everything still feels unreal." "Take all the time you need," she said quickly, "just please do not leave me." But leaving had already begun long before I packed a bag or stepped out the door. It had begun the moment she spoke those words. And I was no longer sure it could be stopped. That night the house felt less like a home and more like a waiting room where neither of us knew what verdict was coming. We moved around each other carefully, avoiding contact, avoiding even accidental touches, as if proximity itself might trigger another collapse. Emily offered to make dinner, then seemed to realize how absurd the gesture was, and retreated to the kitchen anyway. I heard cupboards opening, closing, the quiet clink of dishes, movements stripped of their usual rhythm. When she finally called that food was ready, her voice sounded tentative, uncertain, like someone asking permission to exist. I sat at the table out of habit, not hunger. Neither of us ate much. The silence stretched so long it developed weight, pressing down on everything. At one point she reached for the salt and our fingers almost brushed. She pulled back immediately, as though burned. I could not remember the last time simple contact had been something to fear. Afterward she began washing dishes, even though there were barely any left to clean. The running water created a steady background noise that felt oddly comforting because it filled the emptiness. I stood in the doorway, watching her shoulders move slightly with each breath, wondering how a person could look so familiar and so foreign at the same time. "I am going to stay at a hotel for a few days," I said finally. She froze, hands submerged in the sink. For a moment I thought she had not heard me. Then her shoulders slumped just a fraction. "Okay," she said quietly without turning around. No argument, no pleading, just quiet acceptance, which somehow hurt more. "I need space to think," I added, though the explanation felt unnecessary. "I understand." The words sounded rehearsed, as if she had been preparing for this possibility all day. When she finally turned around, her eyes were glossy, but she held herself together with visible effort. "Will you come back?" I hesitated because I did not know the answer. "I do not know." Honesty felt cruel, but anything else would have been worse. She nodded once, swallowing hard. "I will be here. Not I will wait, not I will fight, just I will be here." As if she no longer believed she had the right to ask for more. Upstairs, I opened the closet and pulled out a small travel bag, one we had used for countless weekend trips over the years. The sight of it triggered a rush of memories: hotels near the coast, late-night walks, unfamiliar cities, laughter over bad room service. I folded clothes mechanically, trying not to think about whether there would ever be another trip together. Each item placed inside the bag felt symbolic, like packing away pieces of a shared life. From downstairs, I could hear nothing: not movement, not television, not even the soft background music she usually played. The silence suggested she was sitting perfectly still, as if afraid any sound might drive me away faster. When the bag was full, I paused, scanning the bedroom. Photographs lined the dresser: wedding pictures, family vacations, snapshots of birthdays and graduations. Evidence of a life that had once felt unshakable. Now they looked like artifacts from another timeline. I picked up one photo without really intending to. It showed us standing on a beach years ago, wine tangling her hair, my arm around her shoulders, both of us squinting into bright sunlight. We looked happy, undeniably happy. The question that had been haunting me all day returned with fresh force. Was that happiness real? Or had it been layered over something I never saw? I set the photo back down carefully, as if it might break. Downstairs, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, exactly where she had been that morning, hands folded in front of her, posture rigid. A cup of coffee sat untouched, growing cold just like before. She looked up when I entered, her gaze dropping immediately to the bag in my hand. "So it is really happening," she said softly. "I am not leaving forever," I replied automatically, though I had no certainty behind the words. "Just a few days." She nodded, slowly absorbing that. "Do you want me to drive you?" she asked after a moment, the offer so ordinary it felt surreal. "No, I will take my car." Another nod. The effort it took for her to remain composed was visible in every small movement. "Nathan," she said just before I reached the door. I stopped but did not turn around. "I am sorry for destroying the life you believed in. Not I am sorry for what I did, but for destroying the life you believed in." The distinction struck deeper than any apology she had offered before. For a moment I could not speak. Then I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the faint smell of fallen leaves and distant smoke. Outside, everything looked exactly the same as it had the night before: quiet street, dim lights, ordinary suburban calm. It felt almost insulting that the world continued unchanged. I walked to the car, placed the bag in the trunk, and slid into the driver's seat. Through the windshield, I could see the silhouette of our house windows glowing softly. Somewhere inside, Emily was probably still standing where I had left her, waiting. The engine started with a low, steady rumble, grounding me in the present. As I pulled away, the house slowly receded in the rearview mirror, becoming smaller, less detailed, until it was just another shape among many. A place full of memories. A place full of secrets. I did not know where this road would lead, whether back to her or somewhere entirely different. For the first time in nearly 40 years, the future was not mapped out. It was an empty stretch of darkness ahead, illuminated only as far as the headlights could reach. Terrifying, but also honest in a way my life had not been for a very long time. I checked into a small business hotel near the interstate, the kind of place designed for people who were not planning to stay long. Neutral colors, identical furniture, the faint smell of industrial cleaner in the hallway, nothing personal, nothing memorable. The receptionist did not look up for more than a second while handing me the key card. "Room 314, elevator to your left." Her indifference felt strangely appropriate. To her, I was just another traveler passing through, not a man whose life had cracked open 24 hours earlier. Inside the room, everything was painfully orderly. Bed perfectly made, curtains drawn halfway, desk lamp glowing with sterile white light. I placed the bag on the chair and stood there, unsure what to do next. For decades, every evening had been structured: dinner, conversation, television, or reading beside Emily, the quiet comfort of shared routine. Now there was only silence, thick and unfamiliar. I sat on the edge of the bed, then stood again, then walked to the window and back like an animal placed in a new enclosure. Eventually I turned on the television just to create noise, but the cheerful voices from some late-night show felt obscene against the heaviness in my chest. I muted it, leaving only flickering images. My phone lay on the nightstand, screen dark. No messages. Or perhaps many I had not yet checked. I turned it face down, unwilling to see her name glowing there. Sleep did not come. Instead, memories replayed in relentless detail, moments I had not thought about in years, now examined under harsh new light. A weekend when she had insisted I take the kids camping without her because she claimed she needed time to rest. A sudden interest in jogging during that same period, though she had never liked running before. Phone calls she ended quickly when I entered the room. At the time, none of it had seemed significant. Now each fragment rearranged itself into something far more disturbing. The worst part was realizing how easily trust can be exploited. When you believe someone would never hurt you, you stop looking for signs that they already have. Around 3 in the morning, I finally drifted into a shallow sleep filled with disjointed dreams where rooms had no doors and voices spoke from behind walls. I woke before dawn, disoriented, unsure where I was, until the bland hotel ceiling came into focus. For a moment, panic surged, irrational and intense, then receded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. I showered, dressed, and left the room because staying inside felt suffocating. The lobby smelled of burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. Outside, the sky was still dark, streetlights casting pale circles on empty pavement. I drove without purpose, eventually pulling into a diner that had just opened, its neon sign buzzing faintly. Inside, only a few people sat, scattered in booths: truck drivers, early shift workers, strangers sharing nothing but temporary proximity. I chose a seat at the counter. "Coffee?" the waitress asked, already pouring before I answered. Her efficiency felt comforting, uncomplicated. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. Normal conversation hummed around me, fragments of complaints about traffic, jokes about supervisors' plans for the weekend. Ordinary life continuing everywhere except inside my head. "Do you want anything to eat?" "Toast," I said, though I doubted I could swallow it. As I waited, I noticed a couple seated 2 stools down from me, an older man and woman speaking quietly, leaning slightly toward each other. Nothing dramatic, no grand gestures, just the easy closeness of people who had spent many years side by side. Something in my chest tightened painfully. Had Emily and I looked like that yesterday? Would we ever again? My phone buzzed on the counter, making me flinch. Her name filled the screen. I stared at it until the vibration stopped. Then it started again. Finally, I answered, not trusting myself to speak, but unable to ignore it forever. "Nathan, are you okay?" Her voice sounded small, fragile. "I am alive," I said. "That is not what I meant." "I know." Silence stretched between us, neither of us knowing how to navigate this new terrain. "Did you sleep?" "Not really." "I am sorry." The phrase had lost meaning through repetition, yet I could hear genuine despair behind it. "I keep thinking about what I did," she continued. "I would give anything to undo it. But time does not move backward," I said quietly. Another silence, heavier than the first. "Will you come home today?" she asked. I looked at the couple beside me, the woman touching the man's hand lightly as she spoke. "I do not know. Please do not disappear." Disappear. The word unsettled me. As if she feared not just losing the marriage, but losing me entirely. "I am not disappearing," I said. "I just need space." "I will wait," she whispered. After the call ended, I sat staring into my coffee long after it cooled. For the first time, anger began to mingle with something else, grief, not just for what had happened but for what might never exist again. When I returned to the hotel, the room felt even more impersonal than before. A temporary shelter, not a place to live. I realized with a quiet certainty that no amount of distance could restore the person I had been before her confession. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The man who had walked into that house 2 nights earlier no longer existed. Whether the marriage survived or not, I would never again move through life with the same unquestioning trust. Outside, the window traffic increased, the day fully awake now. People heading to jobs, meetings, errands, lives defined by predictable routines. I wondered how many of them carried secrets invisible to everyone around them. How many smiling couples at traffic lights were one confession away from collapse. The thought was both terrifying and strangely clarifying, because it meant I was not uniquely cursed, just painfully human. Still, knowing that did not make the path ahead any clearer. All I knew was that eventually I would have to decide whether to rebuild something broken or walk away from it entirely. And neither option felt survivable, yet one of them would have to be. By the second night, the hotel room had already begun to feel unreal, like a temporary shelter built outside the flow of ordinary time. The clock on the bedside table glowed a dull red, each minute sliding forward with mechanical indifference. I had spent most of the day wandering through nearby streets, sitting in parks, drinking coffee I did not taste, trying unsuccessfully to outrun my own thoughts. Every path eventually circled back to the same question. What now? Not what happened. That part was fixed, unchangeable, embedded permanently in the past. The real terror was the future, an open space with no familiar landmarks. Late in the evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it was not Emily. It was our daughter Lily. Seeing her name sent a jolt of anxiety through me because it meant the situation had already begun spreading beyond the two of us. "Hey Dad," her voice sounded cautious, like she was approaching a wounded animal. "Mom says you are staying at a hotel. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, searching for a response that would not force her into the middle of something she did not deserve to carry. "Just needed some time to think," I said finally. "About what?" "Adult stuff." She did not sound convinced. "You and Mom never fight," she said quietly. "Never fight." If only she knew how misleading that appearance had been. "Sometimes people hide things too well," I replied before I could stop myself. A pause followed, long enough for regret to settle in. "Did something happen?" she asked. I closed my eyes, leaning back against the headboard. "Yes, but it is not something you need to worry about. You both sound like something terrible happened." Her voice wavered slightly and guilt twisted inside me. "I am sorry, I did not mean to scare you." Another pause, softer this time. "Are you coming home soon?" I looked around the anonymous room, identical furniture, bland artwork mounted to the wall, carpet patterned in a way designed to hide stains. "I do not know yet." Mom sounded really upset. "I know. Take care of her, okay?" The words slipped out instinctively, the same protective reflex I had always had. Then the irony struck. For decades I had believed I was protecting our family by working harder, by trusting more, by not questioning. Now protection felt impossible. "I will call her tomorrow," Lily said, just checking. "I love you, Dad." "Love you too." When the call ended, the silence returned heavier than before. The children we had raised together were now adults with their own lives, yet the ripple of this revelation had already reached them. Secrets rarely stay contained. Once exposed, they spread outward, touching everyone connected to them. I stood and walked to the window, pressing my forehead lightly against the cool glass. Below, cars moved steadily, headlights sliding along wet pavement like streams of light. Each vehicle carrying someone somewhere purposeful. For the first time, I wondered whether leaving the house had been escape or avoidance. Distance had not brought clarity, only exhaustion. Maybe clarity required confrontation, not flight. The idea of returning filled me with equal parts dread and relief. Back in that house, every object held meaning, every room echoed with shared history. Here there was nothing to anchor me, not even pain, just emptiness. My phone vibrated again, another message from Emily, this time text, not a call. "I am not trying to pressure you, I just want you to know the house feels unbearably quiet without you." I stared at the words for a long time. Not because they were manipulative, but because they were probably true. Silence in a shared space can be louder than any argument. I typed a response, erased it, typed again, erased again. Finally, I sent only 2 words. I am safe. 3 dots appeared immediately, then vanished, then appeared again. Thank you, she replied after a moment. No pleading, no questions, just gratitude for basic information. Something about that restraint hurt more than desperation would have. It suggested she believed she had already lost the right to ask for anything else. I set the phone down and sat on the edge of the bed staring at nothing. Anger had begun to fade, replaced by a deeper, heavier sorrow. Not just for the betrayal, but for the realization that the life we had built was now balanced on a fragile edge. Rebuilding trust after decades of deception felt almost impossible. Yet abandoning everything we had shared felt equally devastating. I lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, watching shadows from passing headlights drift across the ceiling. For a brief moment, I imagined returning home tomorrow, walking through the door as if nothing had changed. But imagination could not overwrite reality. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me into sleep deeper than before, dreamless and heavy. When I woke, sunlight was already filtering through the curtains, and for a few seconds I did not feel the crushing weight in my chest. Then memory returned, steady and merciless. Today I would have to decide something, not everything but something. Remaining suspended between 2 lives could not continue forever. I sat up, slowly breathing in the stale, conditioned air of the room. Whether I was ready or not, the next step was approaching. And I had no idea if it would lead back to her or away for good. I drove back toward the house late that afternoon without fully deciding that was what I was doing. At first I told myself I was just passing through the neighborhood, just checking whether anything looked different from the outside. But when the familiar streets began to appear, one after another, muscle memory guiding each turn, I stopped pretending. The sun hung low, casting long amber shadows across the lawns, making everything look softer, almost peaceful. Children rode bicycles in slow circles, a man watered his driveway for no reason other than habit, a dog barked lazily from behind a fence. Ordinary scenes from a life that until recently had also been mine. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I approached our street. For a moment I considered driving past, continuing until the road ended somewhere far away. Instead I slowed. Our house came into view exactly as I had left it, porch light off, curtains half-drawn, mailbox slightly crooked from last winter's snow. No visible sign that anything inside had fractured. I parked at the curb but did not get out. Through the front window I could see faint movement, a silhouette crossing the living room, then disappearing. Emily. Just seeing that outline triggered a surge of conflicting emotions, longing, anger, grief, all tangled together. I realized then that distance had not erased attachment, it had only exposed how deeply rooted it still was. After several minutes I forced myself to step out of the car. The air carried the scent of damp soil and fallen leaves, a reminder that seasons continued their cycle regardless of personal catastrophe. Each step up the walkway felt heavier than the last, as if gravity itself had increased. At the door I hesitated, hand hovering over the knob. This threshold had once represented safety, familiarity, certainty. Now it felt like the entrance to an unknown territory. Before I could change my mind, I turned it. The door opened into a house that smelled faintly of lavender, cleaner, and something baking, perhaps bread or cookies, an attempt at normalcy. Emily stood in the hallway a few feet away, as if she had been waiting there, listening for the sound of my car. She looked thinner than I remembered from only days earlier, cheekbones sharper, eyes shadowed, posture guarded. "You came back," she said softly, not moving closer. For a moment neither of us knew what to do with the physical reality of being in the same space again. "I am not sure for how long," I replied honestly. She nodded, accepting the uncertainty without protest. That alone told me how much had changed. The Emily I had known would have tried to fix everything immediately, fill silence with planned solutions, reassurance. Now she simply stood there, hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if any sudden movement might scare me away. "Do you want coffee?" she asked after a moment. The question was so ordinary, so familiar, it almost broke something inside me. "Sure." In the kitchen, she moved, carefully measuring water, adding grounds, wiping, and already spotless counter movements, precise, controlled. I realized she was giving me time to adjust to being there again. When she handed me the mug, her fingers brushed mine for a fraction of a second. The contact sent a jolt through me, not of comfort, not of anger, just raw awareness. We sat at opposite ends of the table, mirroring our positions from that morning days ago that now felt like another lifetime. I kept expecting her to start talking, to apologize again, to explain, to plead. Instead, she remained silent, watching steam rise from her cup as if gathering courage. Finally, she spoke. "I cleaned out the guest room," she said. "You can stay there if you want." The offer landed gently, almost respectfully, acknowledging distance rather than trying to erase it. "Thank you." Another pause. "Nathan, I know I do not have the right to ask anything, but can I tell you something?" I nodded cautiously. "I am not afraid of you leaving," she said quietly. "I am afraid that even if you stay, you will never look at me the same way again." Her honesty cut deeper than any dramatic apology could have. Because she was right. Something fundamental in how I saw her had shifted permanently. "I do not know what I will feel tomorrow, let alone next year," I admitted. She accepted that too. "I do not expect forgiveness," she said. "I just did not want our entire life to end without trying to be honest at least once." Honest at least once. The phrasing stung, but I could not deny its accuracy. For decades, she had chosen silence. Now honesty arrived like a wrecking ball. Outside, the window dusk deepened the sky, turning it from gold to blue to near black. Lights flickered on in neighboring houses one by one. Life continuing everywhere else. Inside our kitchen, two people sat, surrounded by the ruins of something that had once seemed indestructible. I realized then that coming back had not solved anything. It had simply moved the battle from inside my head back into the physical world. But perhaps that was necessary, because decisions made in isolation often dissolve when confronted with reality. For the first time since the confession, I felt something faint but distinct. Not hope exactly. More like the possibility that the story was not finished yet. Whether it would end in rebuilding or separation, I still did not know. Only that standing outside it had felt impossible. And now I was back inside. Night settled fully around the house, wrapping it in a quiet that felt different from the silence of the hotel. This silence was dense, layered with memories, with routines, with echoes of conversations that had once filled these rooms. I stood in the doorway of the guest room, unsure whether to enter, as if crossing into that space would confirm how much had changed. The bed was neatly made, fresh sheets, faint scent of detergent, pillows arranged with careful symmetry. Emily had even placed a glass of water on the nightstand, a small lamp turned on, casting a warm pool of light. Thoughtful gestures that once would have comforted me now felt painfully deliberate. Proof that she was trying without knowing what success would look like. I set my bag down at the foot of the bed and sat slowly, testing the unfamiliar mattress. Through the wall, I could hear faint movement from the master bedroom drawers, opening, closing, soft footsteps, the quiet rustle of fabric. Two people living parallel lives, separated by a few inches of drywall. For nearly 40 years we had fallen asleep within arm's reach of each other. Now that distance might as well have been miles. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. Every creak, every shift of wood sounding louder than usual, as if the structure itself sensed the tension. Sleep did not come immediately. Instead, memories filled the darkness. Emily curled against my side during winter storms, her hand reaching for mine unconsciously in the middle of the night. The steady rhythm of her breathing that had once been the most familiar sound in the world. I wondered if she was lying awake on the other side of the wall, remembering the same things, or reliving entirely different memories, the ones she had hidden all these years. The thought twisted painfully. Sometime after midnight, exhaustion finally pulled me under. When I woke, pale light seeped through the curtains, accompanied by the faint smell of coffee. For a brief, disorienting moment, I forgot where I was. Then the unfamiliar ceiling returned, everything else with it. Downstairs, Emily stood at the counter pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She looked up when she heard me on the stairs, her expression cautious, searching. Morning. Morning. We hovered awkwardly, neither sure what level of normalcy was appropriate. I made eggs, she said. You do not have to eat if you are not hungry. I realized then how careful every word had become, stripped of assumption of expectation. I will try, I replied. We sat across from each other again, the table now feeling less like a battlefield and more like neutral territory. Outside sunlight touched the tops of trees, painting them gold, while the lower branches remained in shadow. Half light, half darkness, an image that felt uncomfortably symbolic. After a few minutes she spoke without looking up. I scheduled an appointment with a therapist for next week, she said. You do not have to come if you do not want to. I just thought I should do something. The statement surprised me, not because therapy was unreasonable, but because she had taken action without asking permission. Okay. Another pause. Nathan, I also want you to know I will answer any question you have, no matter how painful. The offer hung in the air, heavy with implications. Questions I had been avoiding surged forward all at once. How many times? Where? Did anyone else know? Did she ever think about leaving me? But asking them felt dangerous, like opening doors that might never close again. Not today, I said finally. She nodded, relief and disappointment flickering across her face simultaneously. We ate in relative silence, but it no longer felt as suffocating as before. More like two people learning a new language together, unsure of pronunciation, afraid of mistakes. After breakfast, she began clearing plates, moving with quiet efficiency. I watched her for a moment, noticing details I had overlooked for years: the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the silver strands threaded through her hair, the tension held constantly in her shoulders. Time had touched both of us more than I had realized. Suddenly the story felt larger than a single betrayal. It was about decades, about choices made and unmade, about the fragile illusion that long relationships are immune to collapse. I am going for a walk, I said, standing. Okay, she replied softly. No questions about where, no request to join, just acceptance. Outside the air was cool, fresh, carrying the scent of pine from the hills beyond the neighborhood. I walked without direction, letting my feet choose the path. Each house I passed represented another private world, another set of unseen struggles or quiet happiness hidden behind walls. It struck me that no one looking at our home would suspect anything unusual. From the outside, we were still the stable couple who waved politely and kept their lawn trimmed. Appearances are remarkably resilient even when reality underneath has shifted beyond recognition. Eventually I reached the small overlook at the end of the street, where the land dropped slightly, revealing a wide view of rooftops, trees, distant mountains blurred by morning haze. I stood there, breathing slowly, feeling the tension in my chest loosen just enough to allow clear thought. Leaving had not solved anything. Returning had not either. But staying present might eventually lead somewhere neither escape nor denial could reach. For the first time since that Tuesday night, I considered a possibility that had seemed unreachable before. Not forgiveness, not yet. Not forgetting, never. But coexistence with the truth without letting it destroy everything else. The idea felt fragile, uncertain, like a bridge made of thin glass. Still, it was something. And something was more than the emptiness I had felt before. Behind me the neighborhood remained quiet, the day just beginning. Ahead the mountains stood unchanged, indifferent to human heartbreak. I turned back toward the house, unsure of what the next hour or the next year would bring. Only certain that the story was still unfolding. And that whatever ending awaited us, it would not be simple. When I stepped back inside the house, Emily was in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch, hands clasped so tightly her fingers had gone pale. She looked up immediately, as if she had been listening for the sound of the door every second I was gone. Something in her expression shifted when she saw me, not relief exactly, but a fragile easing of tension, like a rope pulled too tight, finally given a little slack. I took off my jacket and hung it on the hook by the door, the same place it had hung thousands of times before. Familiar motions performed in a reality that no longer felt familiar. I was beginning to understand that nothing external needed to change for everything to feel different. "Do you want lunch?" she asked carefully. I shook my head. Not hungry. She nodded, accepting the answer without pressing. Another small sign of how cautious everything had become. I walked past her toward the staircase, then stopped halfway, turning back. There is something I need to ask. Her posture stiffened, but she did not look away. Anything. The word sounded brave and terrified at the same time. Did anyone else know? For a second she seemed confused, then comprehension dawned. About Mark. Yes. She shook her head slowly. No, no one. I never told anyone, not even my closest friends. I studied her face, searching for any hint of hesitation. Why keep it? The question slipped out before I could stop it. If it meant nothing, why hold on to it for so many years? Her gaze dropped to the floor. Because forgetting it felt like pretending it never happened, she said quietly, and I did not think I deserved that kind of escape. The answer unsettled me more than denial would have. It suggested she had carried the weight intentionally as a form of punishment. Self-inflicted penance does not undo damage, it only hides it. Did you ever think about telling me sooner? Every year, she admitted, but I was afraid that if I said it out loud, everything would collapse. Everything has collapsed anyway, I replied. She flinched but nodded. Yes. The honesty of that single word hung between us, heavy but strangely grounding. For the first time, the conversation felt less like a battlefield and more like two people examining wreckage together. I sat in the armchair across from her, mirroring the position from the night it began. The symmetry was almost unsettling. What changed? I asked. Why now, after all this time? She hesitated long enough that I thought she might refuse to answer. Then she said something I had not expected. Last month, when you were in the hospital. A cold ripple passed through me. I had suffered a minor cardiac episode, nothing catastrophic but serious enough to keep me overnight for observation. Doctors had called it a warning, not a catastrophe. I had treated it as an inconvenience. Go on, I said quietly. When they would not let me see you right away, I thought, she continued, her voice shaking, I thought you might die without knowing who I really was. The image formed instantly. Emily alone in a waiting room, fluorescent lights, harsh antiseptic smell, hours stretching endlessly. Fear stripping away the illusion that there would always be more time. I realized I had stolen your right to choose, she said. You spent your life believing something that was not true, and I decided for you that it was better not to know. Her words landed with unexpected weight. Not because they erased the betrayal, but because they revealed a different dimension of it. Control. She had not only hidden the truth, she had decided on my behalf that ignorance was preferable. And you decided now was the time to give that choice back. Yes. Silence settled again, but this time it felt different, less suffocating, more contemplative. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing softly on asphalt. A dog barked somewhere down the street, ordinary sounds grounding the moment in reality. I leaned back, rubbing a hand over my face, suddenly exhausted. Part of me wished she had never told me. Another part knew I would eventually have sensed something wrong, even without knowing what. Secrets leak in subtle ways, tension, unexplained distance, a feeling that something essential is missing. Did you ever love me less because of him? I asked before I could reconsider. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. No, never. If anything, I hated myself more for what I had done to you. Self-hatred again. It seemed to have been her constant companion all these years. That does not help me, I said quietly. I know. She folded her hands together, gripping them tightly. Nathan, I do not expect you to forgive me or even to stay. I just could not keep living a lie while you believed we were perfect. Perfect. I almost laughed at the word. Nothing human is perfect. We had simply been stable, which is far more fragile than people realize. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The afternoon light shifted slowly across the floor, inch by inch, marking the passage of time. I realized then that the sharp edge of my anger had dulled, replaced by something heavier but less volatile. Grief for the version of us that no longer existed, and perhaps for the version of myself who had believed without question. I stood not because the conversation was finished, but because I needed movement, needed air, needed anything other than sitting inside that gravity. I'm going to lie down for a while, I said. She nodded. Of course. As I walked toward the guest room, I felt her eyes on my back, not demanding, not pleading, simply present. Inside, I closed the door gently and sat on the edge of the bed staring at my hands. They looked the same as always, veins, prominent skin, slightly weathered from years of work. Yet they belonged to someone who felt fundamentally altered. Outside, the window clouds gathered, dimming the afternoon light, casting the room into muted gray. For the first time since the confession, I allowed myself to consider a possibility I had been avoiding. Not whether I could forgive her, but whether I could live with the knowledge without it consuming everything else. Because leaving would not erase what had happened. It would only change the shape of the pain. I lay back, closing my eyes, not expecting sleep, but needing stillness. Somewhere in the house, Emily moved quietly, a drawer sliding, closed, footsteps crossing the floor, life continuing in cautious fragments. The story had not ended. It had only shifted into a phase where every choice would carry weight far beyond the moment itself. And I was no closer to knowing which choice would hurt less. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Visit our channel for interesting and intriguing stories.